Hello everyone. In this video, I would like to talk about a question that we've been receiving over and over lately in this COVID-19 climate from employees. And this is an important question, and it is important to know the answer to this question and the answer to this dilemma before you take any action. So typically this question goes like this. An employee works at a company and they notice that the employer doesn't comply with the basic COVID-19 guidelines. Maybe the employees are not wearing masks when they should. Maybe there is not enough separation, social distancing between desks, between different workers. Maybe there is no proper ventilation. And this issue becomes especially urgent when somebody is diagnosed with COVID. Somebody tests positive for COVID at work, and then other employees become really concerned. They become really fearful for their safety. So what do you do if you are in that situation? Well, you have several options depending on your specific circumstances and your practical reality. So what are your options? The first option is to ask your employer for the obvious solution. Can I work remotely? I don't feel safe. There have been instances where employees have been diagnosed with COVID. I would like to avoid that risk. We don't know who else might be infected. Can I work from home? This might or might not be relevant depending on the size of your organization, size of your company, the feasibility of working remotely, but that's one option. The second option would be simply asking to move your desk further away from other employees. Maybe you're particularly vulnerable. Maybe you are older. Maybe you have pre-existing conditions. Maybe there's another room in your office or another floor in your building where you can work further and avoid unnecessary contact with other employees. Your employer might or might not agree to do that for you, but it cannot hurt to ask for something like that nicely, in a courteous manner, if that's at all possible, and see what the employer says. Maybe the employer would say, look, we cannot put you in a different room, but we can do this other accommodation for you to minimize the risk. You never know. If that's not an option, the next option is to complain internally to your HR or to higher management about non-compliance. You can go to the higher level management and say, look, my employer is not following the rules. This is against the guidelines. This is against the law. I'm asking you to look into it and fix it and remedy it. Your employer might or might not do something about it. Employers often jump right on it, and sometimes they might disagree with you. They say, you know what, we might not do a perfect job, but we do a reasonable job at complying with guidelines, and they can come up with all kinds of other responses that might be less than satisfactory to you. The problem with this option is that if your manager finds out that you complained, they may choose to retaliate against you by writing you up, demoting you, suspending you, or even firing you for unfair reasons. And even though retaliation like this would be illegal, they can still choose to do that. Anti-retaliation protection is not an immunity from being terminated. It's not like you're untouchable. They can choose to terminate you and then deal with the legal consequences if and when you decide to file a claim, file a lawsuit against them. The next option is complaining to Osha, complaining to the outside agency that's in charge of workplace safety and telling them about the issues at your work. And they will usually come and they will investigate, they will issue findings. Sometimes they will even cite the employer and will demand that they will remedy those conditions. The risk in this type of option is similar to the previous option. The employer will usually find out who complained. Even if it's anonymous, they usually have an idea of who felt particularly concerned about the safety, and they will likely figure out that it's you. And if they do figure out that it's you, they again can choose to retaliate against you and even terminate you. And even though, again, it would be illegal if you're able to prove that that was the reason for your termination, they can still choose to do it and then deal with the legal consequences later. Now, of course, whether to take that type of risk or not is a very practical question for you. And that question is very simple. Are you willing to take the risk of being retaliated against? If you really care about your job, if you absolutely cannot afford losing your job at that moment, then maybe you need to think twice about making that complaint and making sure that that's what you want to do. If you don't care, if there's a demand for people like you everywhere, and if you kind of decided that you don't want to work there any longer anyway, and that's not a risk for you, then you might as well complain, since you have nothing to lose. And if the employer retaliates against you, who knows, maybe you will have a good retaliation and wrongful termination case against that employer. And the last option that many employees actually resort to is telling the employer that you're not coming to the office, you're not coming back to work till they do what you believe they're supposed to do to comply with the COVID-19 safety rules. Now, that's often not a great option. I understand where the workers who resort to this option are coming from, but it presents several problems. First, employers in this type of situation often classify that employee as someone who resigned. He's absent without leave. He said he's leaving. He's not coming back. He created these conditions for returning to work. They don't seem to be reasonable for us. He resigned. Proving that you didn't resign is going to be tough, and it's going to depend on the specific circumstances of what the problems were, what you were asking for, and why the employer decided that you resigned. But it's going to be a tough call. For example, if you apply for unemployment in this situation and the employer claims that you resigned, for you to prove that you didn't resign, that you did everything you could to avoid resigning, will likely be an uphill battle. And making a case, a legal case against the employer, when you said that you're not the one who's coming back to work till they fulfill all the requirements, till they have a perfect protection against COVID, is also going to be an uphill battle. That's not to say that that's always a bad solution, but you should at the very least discuss this option and discuss all your options in this type of situation with an attorney before you make the decision. Ideally, you want to start soft. You want to start slow and then escalate your concern further. So going back, there is nothing wrong with at least asking to work remotely if you don't feel like working from the office is safe, or even asking to move your desk away. These are the easiest thing to do for you and for the employer. If that doesn't work, then you can start thinking about complaining to your HR, complaining to your higher management, and then going to Osha if it doesn't help. And then you can take all the further steps. There is no rush to immediately complaining. It cannot hurt having a nice conversation with your employer, honestly explaining to them your concerns, especially if, again, someone in the office has tested positive and you have legitimate concerns. You have legitimate fear of being infected as well.